A boy born into unimaginable wealth, raised in mansions and limousines. But in reality, he was failing miserably until a janitor revealed one life-changing secret. That was the headline whispered through the marble hallways of Crestwood Academy, an elite private school where money bought privilege, power, and prestige. The son of Arthur Westbrook, one of the wealthiest men in America, walked into class every day wearing $1,000 shoes, yet carried the weight of failure heavier than any textbook. His name was Daniel, and despite every advantage his family's fortune provided, private tutors, the best resources, even teachers quietly pressured to help, Daniel failed. Test after test, subject after subject, he sank deeper into the humiliation his father refused to tolerate. On the surface, Daniel seemed lazy, careless, entitled. At least that's what the teachers said when they rolled their eyes behind his back. He doesn't try. He doesn't care. He's spoiled. They assumed his future was secured by inheritance, so why bother working? But the reality was something no one bothered to notice. Daniel wasn't careless. He was terrified. He wasn't lazy. He was drowning. And beneath the confident smirk, he wore like armor. He carried the shame of knowing he was the stupid Westbrook boy, the one destined to disgrace the empire his father built. But unbeknownst to everyone else, the person who would change Daniel's life forever wasn't a high-paid tutor or a world-renowned psychologist. It wasn't his strict father or even the compassionate principal who tried to give him second chances. No, the one person who saw him, really saw him, was the black janitor quietly sweeping the halls at night. His name was Mr. Johnson. To most of the wealthy families, Mr. Johnson looked harmless, invisible even. Just another worker in blue overalls, pushing a mop, carrying a trash bag. They walked past him without a glance, sometimes without basic respect. But behind his calm, humble appearance was a man who brought decades of wisdom, scars of struggle, and a secret that had nothing to do with money, but everything to do with life itself. The first time Daniel spoke to him, it wasn't out of kindness. It was frustration. Daniel had just failed another math exam, his third that semester. He sat on the empty staircase long after the other students left, staring at the red marks bleeding across his paper. Mr. Johnson passed by, whistling softly as he pushed his cart. Daniel blurted out, "You ever feel like no matter what you do, you're just not good enough?" The janitor paused. He leaned on his mop, studied Daniel for a moment, and then said quietly, "Every day of my life, son." Daniel frowned. He expected a quick laugh, maybe pity. But instead, those words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Something inside him stirred, curiosity, perhaps even respect. For the first time, he wondered who this man was. Over the weeks that followed, their conversations grew. Late afternoons when Daniel forgot to go home, or mornings when he arrived early to avoid his father's lectures, he'd find himself in quiet corners with Mr. Johnson. At first, he asked small questions. Why was school so hard? Why did his brain freeze when he looked at numbers? Why did he feel worthless even when surrounded by wealth? And Mr. Johnson never rushed to answer. He listened in a way no teacher or parent ever had. One evening, as the golden light of sunset spilled across the polished floors, Mr. Johnson told him something Daniel would never forget. "You think your problem is failing tests, but that's not it. Your problem is you've been taught to believe the measure of your worth is a grade on paper, and that's a lie. They'll tell you success is about money, about passing exams, about climbing some ladder, but let me tell you what, no. Book will teach you. The real test is how you fight when the world already counted you out." Daniel stared at him, stunned. No one had ever spoken to him like that before. Not his father, who only cared about appearances, not his teachers, who treated him like a lost cause, and certainly not his classmates, who laughed behind his back. But Daniel was skeptical. Easy for you to say, he muttered. You don't know what it's like to have everyone expect you to be perfect. Mr. Johnson's eyes darkened, but his voice remained steady. Son, you don't know what it's like to walk into a room and be treated as less before you even open your mouth. You don't know what it's like to work twice as hard for half as much and still be invisible. You think your name is a curse because it comes with pressure. My name was a curse because it came with chains. So don't tell me I don't understand failure. I lived it. But I also learned how to rise above it, and so will you if you're willing to listen. In that moment, Daniel's arrogance cracked. He didn't have a reply, just silence. For the first time, he realized the janitor sweeping floors beneath chandeliers carried more dignity, more resilience than anyone in his father's world of wealth. Slowly, Daniel began to change. Not because Mr. Johnson taught him formulas or history dates, but because he taught him how to face struggle with courage. Every night, when Daniel stumbled on his homework, Mr. Johnson would sit beside him after finishing his shift. He'd ask simple questions, not about answers, but about effort. Did you try again after you failed? What did you learn when you got it wrong? Are you willing to stand back up even if nobody claps for you? And little by little, Daniel's fear began to fade. But there was one night that sealed their bond forever. Daniel confessed the secret he never dared tell anyone. I think I'm dumb, he whispered, staring at the floor. I think my dad's right. I'll never be anything. Mr. Johnson leaned forward, his voice firm. Listen to me, boy. You are not dumb. You are untrained. There's a difference. Dumb is permanent. Untrained can be changed. They told me I'd never learn either. But guess what? I taught myself to read by flashlight at 15 years old because the schools I went to didn't care if black boys like me could spell our names. I failed more tests than you'll ever take, but I kept going, and now here I am teaching you. Not because I have money, not because I have power, but because I know something your father doesn't. The secret is this. Discipline beats privilege. Persistence beats talent. Every time. Daniel's eyes burned with tears. It was the first time anyone had given him hope that his future wasn't already written in failure. That night, he made a vow to himself. If Mr. Johnson believed in him, he would believe too. But little did they both know, the lessons whispered in empty hallways would soon be tested in the most brutal way possible. Because Arthur Westbrook, the billionaire father, was about to discover that his son had been learning not from him, not from tutors, but from the black janitor he had never even acknowledged. And Arthur Westbrook did not like being proven wrong. Arthur Westbrook was not a man who tolerated weakness. To him, failure was an enemy that could be crushed with enough money, discipline, or power. But when whispers reached him, that his only son had been secretly spending time with the school janitor instead of his high-paid tutors, his pride turned to fury. One evening, Daniel came home to find his father waiting in the marble study, glass of brandy in hand. I did not build an empire, Arthur thundered, for my son to be seen following around a janitor like some lost puppy. Do you understand how humiliating this is? Daniel tried to explain. Dad, he's the only one who helps me. He doesn't just teach me answers, But Arthur cut him off, his voice cold as stone. Enough. From now on, you'll meet only with the tutors I provide. And as for that janitor, he's an employee, nothing more. You stay away from him. The command hit Daniel like a hammer. For the first time in his life, though, he felt something stir inside him. Defiance. Because, unlike the countless times he had bowed to his father's authority, this time he knew the truth. Mr. Johnson wasn't just an employee. He was the only person who believed Daniel wasn't worthless. But Mr. Johnson also knew how power worked. When Arthur confronted him at the school, eyes blazing with contempt, he didn't flinch. Stay in your lane, Arthur warned. You clean floors. Leave my son's education to professionals. Mr. Johnson's reply was measured, but firm. With respect, sir, your son doesn't need more professionals. He needs someone who sees him. That's not about money, it's about patience. Arthur's face hardened, his pride wounded by the thought that wisdom could come from a man he had always dismissed as beneath him. With a sharp turn, he left, muttering that his son would learn the Westbrook way, or not at all. But Daniel was done being invisible. The very next day, he skipped his tutor's session and found Mr. Johnson in the supply closet, polishing a floor buffer. "I don't care what he says," Daniel whispered. "I'm not giving up. Teach me, please." And so their secret lessons continued, tucked away in quiet corners after school. But the lessons were no longer just about math or reading comprehension. Mr. Johnson began teaching Daniel about life itself, resilience, self-respect, and the courage to face failure without shame. One evening, after Daniel stumbled on a problem, for the third time he slammed his pencil down in frustration. "I can't do this. I'll never get it right." Mr. Johnson leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Do you know how many times they told me I'd never get it right? Do you know how many doors were slammed in my face before I learned to stop knocking and start building my own? You think failing a test makes you broken? No, son. Giving up does." Those words lit a fire in Daniel. For the first time, he studied not because he feared punishment, but because he wanted to rise. He worked in silence while the halls echoed empty. And slowly, painfully, the results began to show. His first passing grade wasn't much, a 72 in history. But to Daniel, it was victory. He sprinted down the hallway, waving the paper like a trophy, tears in his eyes. Mr. Johnson just smiled and said, "Now you know what you're capable of. Don't stop here." But their journey was about to face its greatest test. Months later, Crestwood Academy announced its annual academic showcase, an event where students presented their projects before parents, trustees, and media. For Daniel, this was his chance to prove he wasn't the failure everyone believed, but the pressure was unbearable. His father demanded perfection, threatening to pull him from the school entirely if he embarrassed the family name again. The night before the showcase, Daniel sat frozen over his project, a research paper he had worked on for weeks. His hands trembled, his chest tight. "What if I fail tomorrow?" he whispered. Mr. Johnson placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you fail, and you learn, and you stand back up. Because success isn't never falling, it's refusing to stay down. You've already proven you can fight. Tomorrow is just another round." The next day, the grand hall was filled with polished shoes and diamond jewelry. Arthur Westbrook sat in the front row, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Daniel's name was called. As he walked on stage, he could hear whispers ripple through the audience. "That's the Westbrook boy. The one who keeps failing." His knees shook, his palms sweated. But then he saw, standing in the back with his mop bucket, Mr. Johnson, the man who had never stopped believing. Daniel took a deep breath and began. He didn't just read his project, he spoke with conviction, his voice carrying the lessons he had learned in those quiet, hidden hours. He stumbled once, caught himself, and kept going. And when he finished, the room was silent for a moment, before breaking into applause. For the first time, Arthur Westbrook's jaw unclenched. Pride flickered in his eyes, though he tried to hide it. But more importantly, Daniel felt something inside himself shift. He was no longer the boy who failed every test. He was someone who had fought his way forward. After the showcase, Arthur approached his son. His words were awkward, halting. "You did well, Daniel. Better than I expected." But Daniel shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank him." He pointed toward the janitor in the back, standing quietly with his mop. all eyes turned. For a brief moment, the wealthy elite of Crestwood Academy saw what Daniel had always seen, a man of dignity, resilience, and wisdom. Arthur followed his son's gaze. His pride resisted, but his conscience whispered a truth he could no longer ignore. He extended his hand to Mr. Johnson. "Thank you," he said, the words foreign but necessary. Mr. Johnson accepted with a quiet nod. "Just did what needed." "Doing," he replied. But Daniel knew better. What Mr. Johnson had done was more than teach him a subject. He had taught him a secret that no amount of wealth could buy, that dignity is not in what you own, but in what you overcome. From that day on, Daniel studied harder, not to prove himself to his father, but to honor the man who believed in him when no one else did. And as for Mr. Johnson, he kept sweeping floors, unnoticed by many, but forever remembered by the boy whose life he had changed. Because sometimes the greatest teachers don't stand at the front of a classroom. They sweep quietly in the back, holding lessons more powerful than money, more lasting than failure, and more life-changing than any grade.